Smash that like button right now and welcome back Blue Jays Nation, because today we are coming to you with one of those episodes that feels like it has a little bit of everything. A game recap that made the entire fan base exhale after a very rough stretch, a series of injury updates and rotation news that will make you tilt your head just slightly, and then the big one. The bombshell. The trade rumor that is almost too good to be real, the kind of story that should not be happening in the second week of April, and yet here we are because baseball in 2026 apparently has no concept of waiting until summer to start the drama. We are talking about Sandy Alcantra. We are talking about the former National League Cy Young Award winner. We are talking about a pitcher who is currently operating like he never missed a day, and we are talking about a Blue Jays team that is already being named as one of the primary suitors for his services should the Miami Marlins decide to move him. Subscribe to this channel right now if you have not already, drop a like, and let's break down every single thing happening around this franchise right now because there is genuinely a lot to get into. Let's start with the news that made every Blue Jays fan smile for the first time in what felt like a week. The Toronto Blue Jays beat the Los Angeles Dodgers 4-3 on Wednesday to salvage the final game of their three-game World Series rematch series. It was not pretty. It was not commanding. It was not the kind of performance that announces a team has found its identity and is ready to dominate the rest of the American League. But it was a win. A much-needed, momentum-shifting, we still have a pulse win against the back-to-back World Series champions. And sometimes in the long, grinding arithmetic of a 162-game season, that is exactly what your team needs. Dylan Cease took the ball and gave the Jays 5+ innings, striking out 8 batters in a performance that showed exactly why this team invested so heavily in him. Yes, his command was a bit wild. 4 walks and a hit batsman are not the numbers you want from your starter, but 8 strikeouts means he had his stuff working, and when Cease has his stuff, opposing hitters have a very long evening. He ran into trouble in the 6th inning when Will Smith walked, Freddie Freeman singled, and Max Muncy walked to load the bases with nobody out. At that moment, John Schneider turned to Lewis Varland. And Varland delivered. With the bases loaded and no outs in a 1-run game against the back-to-back World Series champions, Lewis Varland entered the game and did exactly what you need your best available reliever to do in that moment. He limited the damage. Teoscar Hernandez's sacrifice fly scored 1 run, but Varland worked out of the jam, and the Blue Jays stayed alive in the game. It was the kind of outing that does not show up on the highlight reel the way a strikeout in the 9th does, but it was arguably the most important contribution in the entire game. You cannot overstate what a performance like that means for a bullpen that has been fighting through inconsistency and injuries and the ghost of Brendan Little's disastrous early season ERA. Varland was composed, efficient, and absolutely ice water in his veins. That is a guy you want on your team. Tyler Rogers came in after Mason Fluharty ran into some trouble in the 7th, and Rogers was excellent. Strikeouts, quick outs, exactly the kind of reliable middle-inning arm that makes a bullpen functional. And then came the moment everyone watching needed to see from Jeff Hoffman. After everything that happened in Game 7 of the World Series, with the entire city of Toronto replaying that 9th inning over and over and over again, Hoffman stepped onto the mound in the 9th with the Blue Jays leading by 1 run, and he struck out Shohei Ohtani before closing out the game for his 2nd save of the season. Let that wash over you. Jeff Hoffman struck out Shohei Ohtani and closed the door on the Los Angeles Dodgers. However briefly the ghosts of last November were hovering over Rogers Center, they were sent back to the shadow realm at least for one afternoon. The go-ahead run in the 8th came in one of those beautifully chaotic ways that baseball specializes in. An error by Will Smith allowed the winning run to score, and the Blue Jays had themselves a W. Vladdy had a double. Andres Menezes contributed with a stolen base that helped manufacture a run in a game where this offense was still not exactly humming. The team got it done with pitching, defense, and opportunistic base running rather than the kind of offensive explosion that will eventually come when this lineup wakes up. But a win is a win, and a win against the defending world champions on the final game of a World Series rematch series is a win that carries weight beyond the box score. Now the team turns the page to a series against the Minnesota Twins, and the rotation news for that series is going to require you to just go along with the ride here, because if you had told anyone in February that Patrick Corbin would be making his Blue Jays debut as a starter in the 2nd week of April against a playoff-caliber opponent, You would have been laughed out of every Blue Jays forum on the internet. And yet here we are. Patrick Corbin is expected to take the ball on Friday, making his Toronto debut. He is followed in that series by Eric Lauer on Saturday and Max Scherzer on Sunday, assuming Scherzer is fully healthy after the minor concern from his last start. Let's be clear-eyed about what Patrick Corbin represents in this context. He is a two-time All-Star who won 18 games in 2019 and was one of the most important pitchers in the Washington Nationals World Series championship run that year. That is the peak version of Patrick Corbin. What he has been for the last several years is a different story, a pitcher working his way back from some very difficult seasons with an injury-ravaged Nationals team, trying to rediscover the form that made him one of the best left-handers in the National League. He spent time in the minors with Single-A Dunedin as a Blue Jays minor league signee, stretched out, and now gets the call because the organization simply needs innings. He was the only pitcher available who had stretched out enough to be a length option rather than just a bullpen ad. That tells you something about where the depth stands right now. But here is what the Corbin situation actually tells you, beyond the roster mechanics. It tells you that the Toronto Blue Jays are resilient, they are creative, and they understand that winning championships is not a linear process. The Yankees had Derek Jeter, and they also had guys nobody had ever heard of making September starts. Every great team eventually has a moment where they are starting someone unexpected and holding their breath. The question is whether the rest of the roster can hold things together while the true weapons get healthy. And the true weapons, Bieber, Berrios, Yesevich, Ponce before his ACL cost him the year, Santander on offense, are working their way back. The cavalry is coming. Patrick Corbin is the bridge. And now let's get to the story that honestly should have you sitting up straighter in your chair, because this one is the kind of baseball rumor that only comes around occasionally and the Blue Jays are right in the middle of it. Sandy Alcantra, the Miami Marlins ace. The 2022 National League Cy Young Award winner. The pitcher who spent 2024 recovering from Tommy John surgery came back in 2025 with a rough but ultimately encouraging second half, and has now entered 2026 looking absolutely nothing like a pitcher who ever had arm problems at all. Through his first 3 starts of the 2026 season, Sandy Alcantra has pitched to a 0.74 ERA across 24 1/3 innings. That is 3 starts, and he has essentially given up 1 run total. His strikeout-to-walk ratio is 18-4. He has already thrown 7 innings, 9 innings, and 8 1/3 innings in his 3 outings, and he has already recorded 1 complete game shutout. That is not just a hot start. That is a pitcher who looks like the 2022 version of himself, the version that led the National League in innings pitched and wins and complete games while posting a 2.28 ERA. The version that made opposing hitters check to see if there was any way to request an early exit from the lineup. That version of Sandy Alcantra is terrifying. USA Today's Bob Nightingale reported this week that rival executives around Major League Baseball fully expect the Marlins to trade Alcantara by the trade deadline. Nightingale is not a writer who throws around phrases like rival executives fully expect, without backing. When he reports that the baseball community broadly anticipates a specific transaction, that is meaningful. And the timing of that report, combined with the fact that Alcantara is in the final year of his 5-year, $56 million deal, with the Marlins holding a $21 million club option for 2027, means that this situation has all the ingredients for a summer blockbuster trade. The Marlins are a small market team in the middle of yet another rebuild. They are not going to be competing for a World Series title in 2026 regardless of how well Sandy Alcantara pitches for them. Every start he makes for Miami is a start that builds his value without the Marlins being able to capitalize on that value in October. The rational organizational decision, and the Marlins have made rational organizational decisions with their stars before, selling high when the moment is right, is to maximize his trade value while he is healthy and dominant and wait for the inevitable parade of contenders to line up at the door. And the Blue Jays should absolutely be at the front of that line. Sports Illustrated's Patrick McAvoy named Toronto as one of the primary potential landing spots, noting that the Blue Jays have been dealing with pitching injuries to the point of signing Patrick Corbin and that if there is any team in baseball that could use an ace right now, it is Toronto. Bleacher Report's Zachary Reimer has been urging this trade since before the season started, making the case that even with a healthy rotation, Alcantara would represent the kind of upgrade that turns a very good pitching staff into a genuinely dominant one. The SI Way Too Early trade deadline big board already lists the Blue Jays as one of the primary landing spots. Multiple outlets, multiple analysts, one consistent conclusion: Toronto and Sandy Alcantra make an enormous amount of sense together. Consider what the Blue Jays rotation looks like at full health. Dylan Cease at the top as your proven ace. Kevin Gausman as a veteran, reliable number 2 option in the final year of his contract. Eric Lauer as your left-handed depth piece. And eventually Shane Bieber and Jose Barrios coming back from their elbow injuries when the calendar flips to May or June. That is already a legitimate rotation for a playoff team. Now add Sandy Alcantara to that group. Now put Cease, Alcantara, Gausman, Bieber, and Barrios on the same pitching staff and tell me what opponent's lineup is sleeping comfortably on any given night. You cannot. That rotation would be a genuine juggernaut, arguably one of the best assembled starting staffs in the American League and arguably in all of baseball. It would make the Blue Jays a legitimate World Series favorite from the moment the deal was announced. There is also the longer view argument, which is just as compelling for a franchise thinking beyond this single season. Kevin Gausman is entering the final year of his 5-year deal. Shane Bieber is a free agent after 2026. Jose Barrios has some flexibility in his contract situation as well. This offseason, the Blue Jays could potentially be looking at significant changes to the back half of their rotation. Acquiring Alcantara and exercising that 2027 club option would give the organization a cornerstone starting pitcher locked in for a minimum of 2 years, at a manageable salary for an ace-level talent, with the health question marks of his Tommy John recovery now seemingly answered by 3 dominant starts in 2026. That is not a deadline rental. That is a genuine organizational asset. The one major caveat to temper the enthusiasm here is the timing. The Marlins are not trading Sandy Alcantara in April. No organization sells an ace at peak value before giving themselves a chance to evaluate whether they can compete. The July 31st trade deadline is the destination, and between now and then, the baseball world is going to spend 4 months evaluating whether Alcantara's early season dominance is sustainable, whether Miami can remain competitive enough to keep his value artificially elevated, and which contenders will be most desperate to acquire him by the time August arrives. Jason Stark of The Athletic noted the Marlins are open for business but that this is a deadline story, not a spring story. That framing is correct and important. What it means for Blue Jays fans is this: watch and appreciate what Alcantara is doing every 5 days in Miami. Let the starts pile up. Let the ERA stay low. Let the trade value continue to build. Because every dominant outing makes the acquisition more expensive, but it also makes the acquisition more valuable. And when the deadline arrives and the bidding war begins, the Toronto Blue Jays need to be in that room with their best offer and the organizational conviction to get this done. The Blue Jays have the prospect capital to make it happen if they want to. They have the organizational infrastructure to absorb a significant trade. And they have the window, a team that went to Game 7 of the World Series 12 months ago, with Kyler Murray as proof that this front office will be aggressive, with Vladdy in his prime and a talented roster that is clearly capable of October baseball when everything is clicking. You do not pass on the chance to upgrade your rotation with a legitimate ace when the window is this open. You go get him, whatever it costs. Now it is your turn to weigh in. Do you want the Blue Jays to go all in on Sandy Alcantara at the trade deadline? Are you willing to give up top prospects for a pitcher who just came back from Tommy John? And who has been your most disappointing Blue Jay through the first couple of weeks of the season? Drop everything you have got in the comments right now because this community needs to have this conversation and I want to read every single take. If this video had you as fired up as I am about the possibilities for this team, smash that like button because it helps this channel grow and keeps the Blue Jays coverage coming every single day. And if you are not subscribed yet, hit that button right now because we are going to be with you for every trade rumor, every injury update, and every moment of this 2026 season all the way to wherever it takes us. Go Blue Jays! We will